This episode is brought to you by Andreas Hamm.
My name is Scott Gershin, and I am Executive Creative Director of the Famosa Interactive Group. I work in multiple mediums. I work in gaming. I work in movies, commercials. Um, for me, I like keeping it fresh. I started in movies, actually, and about 6 years in, I started an interactive group at that time called Soundlux Media Labs, which then became Soundlux Design Music Group, which then turned into Famosa Interactive. And, for me, basically, I'm a storyteller. I like to tell stories with sound. And the tools that I use and how I do it, um, in some ways, are the same in each of the mediums I work in and a little bit different. But whether I design a sound, I supervise a sound, I mix a sound, I go out and record, it's all the same thing. I mean, it's all a means to an end. Um, Ultimately, we start with getting the sounds, going out and recording them. I come from music, so whether I look at a drum set or I look at guns and explosions, they actually have very similarities. So you got to start somewhere. You got to start with the sounds, got to collect them, and then we become kind of audio photographers and collecting many, many terabytes of sounds. And after putting 30 years in, the collection starts growing. And our job is to capture different aspects of life. And then we manipulate those sounds to create new realities, of whether it's the sound of a laser or the Hollywood punch or something that becomes effective in helping us tell the story we want to tell. I've been creating sound for games and movies for about 25 years. And I love movies. I love games. They're different. They're different challenges. I do love the art of storytelling, and I like to be able to tell stories. In gaming, sometimes it's a story, and sometimes it's an experience, something that you want to interact with, something that you want to be part of. So, in movies, I can tell a story linearly, and it's kind of like a song where there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. Act one, two, and three, and I can progress that soundtrack, to take the audience, bring them up, bring them down, bring them up, bring them down, because I get to control it. Um, Whether I use silence, what's kind of fun with films is that I'm in a controlled environment. You're mine. Hopefully, you're not on your cell phone, but when you're in the theater, I get you for about 2 hours, an hour and a half, to make you giggle, to make you scared, to make you in awe, to take you on a journey, to hopefully take you away from your life and to have you experience something else. In gaming, it's a little bit different in that I'm not as much in control. I've got to create parameters that allow you to go on your own journey, which I'm not taking you on. But at the same time, immersing you in an environment that allows you to become part of the story. Because in film, you get to watch the story, kind of voyeur. In gaming, you actually participate. So at that point, how do we create the realities? How do we create an experience where you believe in the illusions that we're trying to portray? And you know, when you create sound, when you're an artist, it's not how you do it at first. It's what you want to create. You don't like go, I want to take a whole bunch of notes together. I have an idea in my head, and now how do I do that? Whether it's creature sounds, we're always trying to push the bar. I'm always trying to push the bar. I'm always trying to find a different way of either telling a story or having a gameplay or have a new experience. Or having a submersive experience where they go, wow, I was there. I buy the illusion. And then each time we figure out, okay, now I have an idea what I want to do in my head. how do I do it? How do I approach it? What aspects do I need to do to be able to complete that? When you look, I mean, I guess for me, when I look at the end product of a game and when I look at the end product of a movie, I actually want something similar. Um, a little bit different, but there's a lot of similarities. So now the question is, how do we get there? In movies, a lot of times people say, "Oh, I got thousands of sounds in a game." I got thousands of sounds in a movie. I have thousands of tracks in a movie. So the question becomes, how do I build an interactive experience? Now, one thing that's totally unique between movies and games is that in a game, you get to play the scene back and over and over and over. You don't do that in a movie. I take you from point A to point B, and that's it. You experience it one time, and we move on to the next phase of the story. In gaming, you can kind of hang out in an area and actually keep reliving it. That's the challenge. The redundancy. How do I keep making it fresh in a redundant environment? Well, that's variation. And that's where you kind of got to be an audio psychologist and go, well, what is the difference? For instance, when you take a gun and you shoot it, you never want it to be the exact same gun sound because the bullets flying out, the acoustics of the environment are different. So you can use physics as a model, which gaming has been doing for almost since the beginning. Two things collide, you hit something, and a sound occurs. But it doesn't give you the emotional arc. Bang, 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 foot, 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 explosion, what happens? But now sometimes I might want to create a certain amount of chaos. Something where, because I'm either winning or losing, I want to give the player an emotional arc where it's building, it's building, it's building, and boom, silence. Maybe let music play. All of a sudden, it takes them into a different reality. You could do that in gaming. You just have to be able to program it. So every instance and every sound, you've got to say, how and where is it going to be used? Now, we might have in a firefight, or here's a different instance, a creature. Creature's got 12 legs. Well, theoretically, there's 12 different collision points. I don't want to hear 12 legs. It's too many legs. Because at that point, what happens is I have to help the audience or the player figure out what I want them to hear. Not only what they're going to hear, but what do I want them to hear? So a lot of times I can maybe get away with 4 legs. Or if it goes by, here a section of legs, make it go away, here another section, so I keep having sync. When I have 20 creatures around me, I don't know if I want to hear all 20 creatures. So at that point, I have to start making certain decisions, whether in programming, and really start integrating how I'm going to use those sounds, not only in a physics way, but in an emotional way. It's easy. Well, it's not that easy. It's a lot of times you go after, let me hit all the things that are obvious. Let me hit what's real. But then we need to create different arcs because reality sometimes is boring. It's not good storytelling. It's not as exciting. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. Even in those things like a Saving Private Ryan or a Call of Duty or something that's similar, is it similar? Is it not? What's the same? And then you got to play a different game. What's reality and what's perceived reality? For instance, the Hollywood punch. There's never a punch where you hear the bam hits. If it was, it'd be a one punch fight. But that's what people are used to hearing. Cars. They're used to hearing cars. Cars are making very little sound these days. So at that point, what is your perceived reality and what is real reality? And the reality of it is perception is reality. What you think it should sound like is actually what it should sound like. Or you could redefine it into something totally different. When you look at games and there's different types, it's almost like different types of movies. And that's kind of fun. There are simulator games, there are story games. So you've got The Last of Us, which is an apocalyptic story. And then you got Forza. And that is a simulator. That is somebody who really wants to get in a $500,000 car and make believe they're driving it. They want to live that illusion. So when you are in a simulation environment, whether it's airplanes or cars, you want to make it real. That's where you mic the back differently than the front, and the way the wind, and you actually analyze, and you're going for the epitome of reality. Why? Because you want to be able to make a driver who actually drives the car go, yeah, that's pretty much what it sounds like. So you want to give them an experience that they probably wouldn't be able to get on their own. So in a situation of a simulator, you go in for the exact essence, and reality is everything. So you don't want to hype it up. You don't want to Hollywoodize it. You don't want to create a a different perception. You want it. Um, in other movies, whether it's Fable, The Last of Us, Gears of War, Gears of War, we want to make it fun. These big guys. I mean, we want to make it where the guns are big and there's a certain amount of to it, and the creatures, and it's a certain amount of fun. So yes, it's over the top. It's a little aggressive, but that's what it's supposed to be. That's part of the enjoyment of that kind of title, and a lot of ear candy. You want to hear things you haven't heard before. You want to, and not only that, with a Gears, there's a mythology that you have to start staying true to because you created it. So now all of a sudden, if you start changing the audio mythology of a game, then the hardcore players are going to be upset because you've just taken it in a different place. So you have to stay true to the environment that you create, whether it's a Star Trek, a Star Wars, a Gears, a Halo. People getting used to what these things sound like. You don't want to change the sound of a lightsaber because people go, "That's not a lightsaber." You know. When you mix a game compared to a movie, I actually, when you look, like I do a lot of work with Guillermo del Toro. So you look at the Hellboys and the Pacific Rims. You know, Guillermo always used to say, or always says, that, you know, you're in a movie theater, let's have some fun. I want to hear the sub and I want to hear the surrounds. I want to be submersed in that kind of environment. So movies can have a lot of surrounds, especially now with Atmos, where there's gravity, or these shows where the audience in 3D is there. Okay. So now games. How does it work in games? Well, it works similarly, sort of, except for one thing. In movies, we're taking you on a journey. We're controlling the environment. We're controlling the story. We're moving the music in and out to create different emotional peaks and valleys. In a game, the audio plays a different role. The audio plays a strategy role. I want to know if an enemy's behind me. Now, all of a sudden, I want to hear him. Maybe. Or maybe I don't. Maybe that's the trick of the game. I didn't hear him coming because we're in stealth mode. But the positioning becomes more of a hunting game where you get to use your senses. That's where I kind of love games and audio because now, instead of just using your sight, you get to use your ears in a strategic way as you would in normal life. So if you were out in the jungle and you hear a tiger behind you, you're going to turn around and you're going to try to defend yourself. Same thing in gaming. It's not that way in movies. Because in movies, we're going to take you down a place that we're controlling. So in games, it's uncontrolled. So I think that the audio in games create a much more or has a much more strategic role in part of it. I think that audio for games is not an ornament. It's not a little something extra. It is part of the game. It can be a crucial part of the game. If it's utilized and produced correctly, it's another sense. And that's kind of fun. So that way, we get to use those tools to either create red herrings or to give the player clues as to what they need to do. I've been using sound for strategically almost since the beginning when I did the McWarrior series. where all the MechWarrior 2 stuff, where we had Bitch and Betty. First of all, Bitch and Betty was telling you a lot of things about what was happening with your mech. And not only that, but when all of a sudden we built it, actually, even in those days with surround stereo, we would put 3D audio with HRTF and all these different tricks to put sounds in different places to make you turn around. Same thing when we did it in surrounds. So, you know, there's so many instances, whether it's something of Gears as of late or all the way back to MechWarrior, having a knowledge that something is positional or something is in your area. All of a sudden you hear a zombie scream. You're like, zombies are here. Whoops, whether it's Resident Evil. So um, it's a tool. It's a tool to better enhance gameplay um, for the audience. Certain types of projects depend more and less. A romantic comedy uses audio in a very different way. So does a mobile game, where it's just kind of like whack the things, whether it's Stickman or you're skiing or something like that. It plays a lesser role. But then when you start taking the more immersive, more sci-fi, now all of a sudden, really what we're all trying to create, whether it's Atmos movies or 7.1 games and games now coming out in Atmos, we want the holosuite. We want to be able to put the goggles on with Oculus goggles. I did a project recently, which was kind of fun, the merging of two worlds. We did it at Comic-Con with Pacific Rim with Oculus goggles, where you got a chance to be one of the Jaeger pilots. And you go in and you see Knifehead and you look and you can look around and you're there. I thought it was a wonderful application for Oculus because you have goggles because they had goggles and you do the drift and it's a perfect simulation in every way of what it could be. And it's a movie meets a game. So that was kind of fun. And Bitch and Betty was kind of, or actually at that point it was Gypsy, was everywhere around us, giving you hints and clues. So it's great. I mean, we want the holosuite. We want the illusion. We want to be able to fantasize that we're in that environment. As an audio professional, we have to take into account all the different mediums we work in. Sometimes you want to do that big rock concert where the guitar goes down and the lights turn on, the pyro goes, it's exciting. Oh my God. So we strive for many different types of artistry. It's fun when you get to do multi-channel with subs and you get to rock the room and you get to be the rock star with sound, whether it's movies or games. Mobile technology has changed the industry and it's now becoming a slightly different experience. I do believe the AAA titles will be in multi-channel, and whether it's a new Atmos home thing or 7.1 or whatever the format of the day is, whether it's curved 3D for the latest TVs or the giant screens, there's always going to be a market for that. But what happens is we're expanding the market. It's not just that. We're in a time, an era of disposable entertainment and entertainment on demand. So at that point, people will go for lesser quality. I mean, think about the music we listen to, and MP3 is not a great sounding format, but it's convenient. Neither was the cassette, but it was convenient. So people like convenience, and they're willing to trade off. So the question then for us becomes, how do we bring the best experiences? When I started in this business, we were 8-bit. It was really hard, actually. We started with very low sample rates. Pick your 60 best sounds at best. So when I see mobile, I go, hey, we're kind of back here again. A little bit better audio quality, but we're kind of back here. At that point, you have to be able to make those decisions. How to best support the story or the game or whatever you're working on within the environment you're at. There's a lot of different tricks, compression tricks. The way you approach a mix is very differently. different dynamics. So they're wearing headphones. Are they going to wear headphones in a noisy environment? Is there dialogue involved? How's the music's going to be involved? So at that point, it creates a different kind of technical challenge. So you then have to figure out what medium you're being played back on, and then you create your technology, your techniques, your trade, your artistry to fit that environment. We did years ago. We did a project called T2 3D for Universal. 24 speaker locations. Things were all over the place, and actors popping out of screens, and it was great, and subs everywhere. Well, that was fun. That's like the ultimate experience on sound wise. And then you got stuff that we're doing on the internet that has to be able to tell a story, tell an illusion that that works within stereo, within whatever. It's got to work on your laptop, and it's got to sound good. So it's different challenges and it's different approaches. But for me, that's kind of what makes it fun, in that it's not easy. You've got to figure out maybe a different way of working. And one thing I love about the gaming world, which is a little different than film. Film a lot in the past is this is the way we've done it. We've done it this way for a very long time. There are very set principles, and I believe the reason for that is that if you're going to spend $200 million on something, that's not experiment on my dollar. Let's make sure it's going to work and it's going to work well. In gaming, it's the wild, wild west. So in gaming, it was like, I'm not sure this is going to work, but let's try for it. Except for now gaming is becoming $80 million game, $100 million game. They're playing making less games, and then more important, more money per game, less games, which means I have to make sure that everything is perfect in the different mediums and different artistries that they're supporting. So I think the experimentation of the AAA is maybe a little less. You still get the time, but they got to make sure it's fine. And they're going to make sure they hire the people that can do that. I think when you look at indie films and indie games, that's where you're back to the Wild West again. And what's great about the Wild West is you get to experiment. You get to try new things. Um, you know, um, Music, I think, is a wonderful platform for games because you've already got an audience. The moment you say video games, it can offend a certain part of the public. So at this point, they're thinking, "Oh, it's video games." Um, so at that point, you don't have to be careful. Like in TV, if they go, "Yes, we need Nine Inch Nails," like Barry Manilow style. They want it edgy, but not too edgy. Nothing just going to offend anybody. In games, we're already offending everybody because we just said the word video games. And it's changing, but in the past it's been that way. So at that point, you go, all right, now we can do whatever we want. The music could be edgy, or it could be a juxtaposition where you can have 1920s music. You could do like a Shining. There's so many great, wonderful palettes available to us, more than records, way more than TV. And I think, and I'd say even maybe more than a lot of movies. I think gaming musically, it's just a wonderful opportunity to create whatever you want. When you compare games and movies, I've noticed that there's a great relationship between the gaming and the movie public. The people that do these work on both. TV doesn't. I'm going to make a generalization here. Most TV doesn't spend as much time on sound because of dynamic range issues. Everyone wants to turn it down. The kids are sleeping upstairs, so they turn it down. Um, so I think that there's not as much time. There's some great, great sound in TV, but when you look at the majority of it, it's not as designy. It's not as um, they don't get as much time to spend on it as you would a game or a movie. Um, I think that you know what's hard about designing games is the same as designing science fiction movies. But the thing is, there's only probably about a dozen at most science fiction movies a year that comes out. and there's probably 100 to 200 science fiction games that come out. So what happens is they want to keep raising the bar. Hey, I want it to sound like this, so they make it sound like that. I want it to sound like this, they make it sound like that. Now what? We've already made it sound like all of our favorite movies. Now we want our own voice. We want our own signature. We don't necessarily want to sound like a movie. We want it to sound like itself, its own mythology, its own sonic library. And that's where the fun begins. And that's where, you know, I believe the great challenges are. And it's why I love doing sound for games and movies. But games is just pretty much a lot of it's just science fiction, which is fun. I've been doing sound for games for probably 25 years. And when we first started in the process, nobody knew what they were doing. Nobody knew how they were going to do because the tool sets were unique and there was a certain, as I mentioned before, the wild wild west. And what I mean by that is we were doing spycraft, and we were doing it was many games combined into one. So they wanted to do this Rainbow Six style game, except Rainbow Six was just 10 years before that. So they wanted to make it where we get to control, and you see a blueprint, a floor plan of the place that you need to go and extract the hostage that you've been assigned to extract. So you basically it's all through like talking. So they said, well, we don't have any more money. We've already spent it. We don't have the time to do this huge um, project where we get to see it and go 3D and blah blah. And the technology was barely there. So I said, hey, I got a great idea. Let's do a radio show. Let's do it because as many times it's all through sound. And you see the little dots going in. You hit the wrong door, it's the enemy. You hit the right door, it's and every door had some kind of surprise. So we built it in such a way where it was all audio driven. But we were kind of at the end of the project and they had no money. So I came up with another idea. I said, okay, how about we do everything in one day? Let's do it live as a radio show. So we'll have a bunch of people in the corner and they'll be the foreigners talking multiple languages, and like we grabbed a woman taking a baby and singing lullabies, and then we had Foley packs. We had a bunch of backpacks with guns, and then we basically did it all at once, all very 16-hour day, but we did it, and we solved the problem, and everyone loved it, and it was early Activision, and it was the way we solved it, and and they loved it, and it actually turned out really well. Um, there was so much like all of a sudden we needed, I needed Albanian. Does anyone speak any language? You speak a language. Come on in. We had clients coming in. Everybody would do voiceover. SAG wasn't an issue at the time. It was anything goes. And it was more fun because it was on the seat of your pants. Through the years, it started getting more organized. Like any industry, whether it was rock and roll music, where before it used to be a bunch of guys and girls in a garage barely playing their instruments, but everybody liked it. And it wasn't in tune, but it had a lot of soul to it. And music was great. And then it got corporate, and then it got better, and then it just became more scrutinized. Same thing with gaming. I think gaming went from the Wild Wild West to its young childhood. It's kind of like a kid growing up. I'd say right now we're in our 30s. When I started, we were babies. We had no clue. But right now, gaming likes to say, hey, we're making as much, if not making more money than movies. Wow. Guess what? Wall Street heard it too. So did all the investors. And, studios don't really make movies. Studios find investors to be able to support directors who want to make movies. So it's a little bit different. It's a money game. And a lot of times, a lot of the studio system is how do we get money? How do we get the 200 million plus the other 100 million in marketing? That's kind of what's happening with gaming. You've got developers who are trying to create a game, and the publishers are trying to raise money to be able to do that. And they're trying to beat out sometimes themselves, especially when you had some publishers coming out with 12, 20 different games. I think the reason why there's less movies and there's less games is people started realizing they're competing with themselves. So now they'd rather spend more money on less projects but make them amazing. Well, I think now the bar's gone up. There's a lot vested, you know, whether your company succeeds or not. And there's also starting to be wealth that could be made within gaming. And it's becoming a business that, great, I want to put $1 in and I'd like 50 cents out. Maybe I like $2 out. Buck in, $2 out. So now it's becoming a vehicle of how do we invest it? And it attracts a whole lot of other people. So I think right now the bar is getting higher, the pressure's going. I think that that within AAA titles, that has definitely changed, and I'd say now we're all in Harvard Business School age of where gaming was. We started as a little baby, but now we're at in the business school world. The only thing that, of course, loving technology with destructive
Disruptive?
disruptive. Thank you, disruptiveness. You know, what's changing from AAA titles is the disruptiveness within it, and what's that mean? It's what Miramax did with Quentin coming out with Pulp Fiction. Took a bunch of no name or used actors, people that their careers were gone, and resurrected them. Well, that's kind of what's happening with mobile games. Now all of a sudden you got the company spending a lot of money in AAA titles, and the guy creates Angry Birds and out of his garage, or the guy, or those were guys, but the guy that created Minecraft. Now all of a sudden these titles are massive, and they're not part of the big publishing system. Of course, they're running to buy those companies. But it's interesting. I think that gaming is changing. I think gaming wants to be, many different things to many different people. Sometimes you want the big, cool performances, the big, immersive technologies with amazing graphics. And sometimes you want South Park. Sometimes you want Angry Birds. Sometimes you want Mine. The graphics are not really what it's about. Sometimes it's just about great gameplay. It's a fun game. It's a fun thing to do. I think you need to look at gaming and break it into points. I think gaming is too big of a word. It's like saying movies. What kind of movies? Star Wars? Do you want comedy? Do you want a drama? And not only that, but a lot of movies, when I always say movies is kind of a higher level of writing, has now gone into high-end cable or video on demand. Everything from started with Sopranos, going all the way to Game of Thrones. Now all of a sudden you got Netflix. They're changing it up. And I think that, and the reason I compare both of these is they're both high end storytelling. I look at games being high end, and I look at movies being high end, and there's many different ways of telling it. And there's also disruptiveness to both of them, in that with mobile technologies, it changes everything. Both, you can watch a movie on your phone, you can play a game on your phone. From an audio perspective, it's better when we have bigger speakers. It's more fun when we have a sub to work with. When we're having headphones or the little speaker that comes on your mobile device, it creates a different set of challenges for us as audio people. And when I first started the company, part of my logo or motto was keep the audio on. Find a way to be able to have the audio make a difference in the experience that you want to do in gaming. And it's interesting how we've almost gone full circle. We started it with Sega, and now we're back with mobile, and we're kind of having to say the same thing. We need to create, between music and sound effects and even dialogue, the reasons to keep the audio on, to make that the gameplay much more of a enhanced experience.
Open up.
As audio professionals, we do look at all the opportunities to be able to enhance our sound. Again, like I made a mention earlier on, I used 3D audio techniques. There was so many everyone had hardware to create a pseudo stereo environment. What's interesting is it didn't work well on film. It actually didn't work at all. it works really well in headphones. But at that time, nobody was using headphones. Well, now with mobile technologies, they're using headphones. So yeah, there's a great opportunity now, whether you're recording with the head, all these old devices or techniques in how you record with holophones and the Neumann head and many, many different techniques. Um, uh, uh, that now with as long as they get sample rates up, now with mobile technologies, people using headphones, we can give them yet another experience. I think that's what's kind of fun about what we do, and the challenges is the exploration of how to keep raising the bar in many different ways. And if we're on headphones, it takes some opportunities away, but it does create some new opportunities in how we do things, and maybe also make better sounding headphones.
Have the big game audio technological challenges been solved now, or do you still have an issue that you're constantly butting your head against? I mean, before it was bit rate, sample rates, and now is there a specific technological problem that still needs to be fixed, or have the big
Yeah, I mean,
problems been solved?
when you look at the technology and how it's progressed, um, within the arc of what's happened since the last 25 years, the graphics have gone crazy. It's amazing from Pong to all the amazing graphics that are equaling anything in the movie theater. Audio hasn't gone quite as much. I also think it's because of memory, CPU speed. You know, while many people say audio is 50% of the experience, it's not always 50% of the overhead in technology. So the question is, what are we left with? It used to be great when an Xbox had a hard drive and we could stream off it. And then we could do less with an optical type disc, whether it's a DVD or a Blu-ray. Um, having more voices, I think that, we wanted higher sample rates. We've got higher sample rates. Wouldn't mind a little bit better, like 24-bit rather than 16-bit. There are a couple things we can do, but ultimately, I still think where I envision, where I would like to take it in the next generation is having an audio AI, where now we're no longer doing two collisions of physics colliding, but now we can start creating algorithms for emotional arcs. I think creating a certain randomness that allows us less repetitiveness, which has gotten pretty good. Allowing us to be able, as a user, to be able to select what we want to hear while we're playing. Because a lot of times when you actually hear in real life, your ears are able to focus what you want to listen to and what you want to shut out. Most of the world that we know, most people out there, have been learning their whole life how to not listen. People go, oh, I didn't hear that. Well, because we're so used to going, I don't want to hear all that noise. I want to focus on this. Well, how do we do that in gameplay? How do we help the user be able to do that in a way? I still believe there's so much more to explore, and there's a great frontier in audio ahead of us. I think it's technological. I think it's strategic on how we want to use audio for storytelling. I believe we've been doing the same thing a lot. I think we've been making it better, but I think there's a whole nother level that we can take audio that we haven't, which is what I'm excited to be part of for the future. You know, what's wonderful about, where gaming's gone, and if you want to even call it gaming, I've always liked to call gaming interactive entertainment more than gaming, because a game could be Pong. It's a game. Sometimes it's a simulator that we talked about before, and sometimes it's an interactive experience. It's kind of like you always want to, wouldn't it be great to be a Jedi warrior and be part of Star Wars rather than just watching it? You want to be able to play it and not only do it for 2 hours, but maybe for a whole week. You want a different kind of experience. I think there's a couple of interesting things that are coming about. First of all, is theme parks, interactive theme parks, where all of a sudden you're doing 360 theaters, kind of like a movie, but there's an interactive part of it. And now all of a sudden, I'm seeing a much merger between projected video, film, which is it a film, is it a game? It's not a game, it's not a tablet, it's not on a traditional piece of hardware that you know, something different. The blending of the two is a very interesting opportunity to be able to get us to the holosuite, get us to that point where, laser tag. Well, all of a sudden now, can we take laser tag to a whole nother level? Can we be in there are flight simulators that everybody waits in line, and I want to fly an F-22 or an F-15 Eagle. Well, how about a sci-fi tank? How about something from Halo? How about something from another kind of property that would be great to get in it? I remember the early days of MechWarrior. We all went as a company, and there were these companies that you can get in a hardware mech and on a big screen, and you could ride it. I think it was a wonderful idea very early on. But now, as theaters have tried to go, we need to have dinner theaters. We need to bring people into the theater and have Atmos and 3D. How does gaming take it something to get people away from mobile? Now, all of a sudden, it's got to be a bigger experience. The other thing that's fascinating is we're working with a new company called Cloud Emporium on a project called Star Citizen with Chris Roberts. And I've worked with Chris all the way, Starlancer, freelancer, back in the gaming days. And he's doing something that's quite wonderful and quite interesting. He's creating an online mythology that you can go online to a website, like you buy a Tesla, you can buy a ship. You can design it. And like I've got a 10-year-old son. And I think this is something he'd go, is this real? I'm not totally sure. And he's really good at that. He can watch TV, he can see movies and go, yeah, that's a TV, that's a movie. It's not real. But now it looks so real. And the fantasy, the role playing, to be able to go on the internet, and it's not only one site, it's multiple sites. Now all of a sudden, whether it's SpaceX, you've got another company. You're buying a spaceship. You have multiple choices. Kind of looks like a BMW dealership. It's got different insides. It's got different weaponry. It's got commercials on the internet now that you could, and you look at the commercials and you go, wow, it looks like Top Gear. This looks like I could do it now. What do I buy? It's a wonderful way of how we're taking gaming and creating an interactive experience and expanding upon it. I think that as movies and games, people sometimes want to divide them. I see them on a trajectory at the same place. Because sometimes people want to be told a story and some people want to experience a story, but they want to enhance that experience. And I see both industries on a wonderful collision course of something that might be pretty amazing that I'd love to be part of.